Hello and welcome back to the Deep Dive. There's a comforting story we sometimes tell ourselves about history,
Oh, yeah.
that it's this straight line, a steady march from chaos toward order, from the primitive to the civilized. But if you spend enough time in the archives, you realize history is much more of a loop.
Right. It stutters.
It stutters, it repeats. And sometimes it feels like the writers of reality are just reusing the same script.
It reminds me of that saying, I think it's attributed to Mark Twain, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes.
Exactly. And today we are going to listen to a very specific and frankly pretty unsettling rhyme. We're looking at the concept of the lone wolf attacker, this figure we think of as a purely modern problem, and discovering this brand of chaos has been haunting Latin American politics for, well, much longer than we think.
And to guide us, we're drawing directly from the incredible research of historian and Professor Reuven Fangold of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem.
Professor Fangold has done some remarkable work here.
He really has. He's unearthed this moment in Brazilian history from 1889 that's been, largely forgotten, or at least overshadowed by what came next. It's a story about an emperor, a drunken clerk, a child prodigy, and the green fairy of absinthe.
And what's so striking about this research is that it doesn't just focus on the gunman, it's about the denial. How a society pretends everything is fine, even when bullets are flying. But before we travel back to the gaslit streets of Rio de Janeiro, we have to set the stage with something much more recent. To understand the rhyme, we need to look at the verse that was written just a couple of years ago. We're going back to September 1st, 2022.
The location is the Recoleta neighborhood in Buenos Aires, Argentina. For anyone who hasn't been, this is a very wealthy, aristocratic area, usually quite sedate.
But not on this night.
No, on this particular Thursday night, the atmosphere was a powder keg.
Right. So Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, who was the vice president of Argentina at the time, she's arriving at her home, wading through this sea of supporters. It looks chaotic, loud, the kind of thing you see on the news all the time. But what's the context here? Why was the crowd so intense?
Well, the legal walls were really closing in on her. A prosecutor, Diego Luciani, had just requested a 12-year prison sentence for Kirchner.
12 years.
12 years. The charges were for fraud and corruption related to her time as president between 2007 and 2015. So the country was just deeply, deeply polarized. You had people ready to defend her to the death and people who wanted to see her locked away.
And it's in that chaotic scrum that we see a man push forward, Fernando André Sabag Montiel. And relevant to our story today, he was a Brazilian national.
He manages to get within inches of the vice president. He raises a .32 caliber pistol directly to her.
Right to her face. We've all seen the footage. It's just terrifying.
It is. He pulls the trigger.
And this is one of those moments where history just seems to hold its breath, because we know what happened next. It's to click.
Exactly. The gun was loaded with 5 bullets, but it failed to fire. The mechanism jammed because he hadn't racked the slide properly. He was immediately tackled and arrested.
But the psychological impact, that didn't jam. That went off like a bomb.
It really did.
Yeah.
Despite how polarized Argentina was, that image of the gun in her face just froze everyone. For a brief moment, the whole political machine just stopped. There was this wave of repudiation across the media.
A rare moment of solidarity.
Born out of sheer horror at what almost happened.
It's that fragility, isn't it? The realization that a single mechanical failure, a spring, a stuck slide, is the only thing between business as usual and potential civil war.
Precisely. And this is where Professor Fangold's research pivots us into the past. Because he argues this specific brand of clumsiness, this terrifying ineptitude by a lone actor, it isn't new. If we dial the clock back to July 1889, we find Imperial Brazil facing an almost identical glitch in the matrix.
So let's leave modern Buenos Aires and travel to Rio de Janeiro. It's July 15th, 1889. The empire is in its twilight, though maybe not everyone realizes just how close the end is.
The atmosphere in Rio is, well, it's deceptive. On the surface, it's the height of the Belle Époque. But underneath all that, the foundations of the empire are rotting away.
And the setting is the Teatro Sant'Anna.
Right, which, if you visit Rio today, you'd know it as the Teatro Carlos Gomes.
And it was a huge cultural event, a gala night. The guest list was, staggering.
It was a full royal outing. You have Emperor Dom Pedro II, who's 63 at this point. You have the Empress, Teresa Cristina, their daughter, Princess Isabel.
The one who signed the Golden Law abolishing slavery just the year before.
The very same.
Yeah.
And Prince Pedro Augusto, along with the eldest grandson.
So that's basically the entire line of succession sitting in one theater box. From a modern security standpoint, that's a nightmare.
A complete nightmare. And the entertainment that night just creates such a stark contrast with the violence that followed. They were there to watch a violin prodigy, an 11-year-old Italian girl named Giulietta Dionisi.
I love that detail. It's so cinematic. You have this aging, bearded emperor, the symbol of the old world, watching a child play the violin. It paints such a civilized, gentle picture.
Until the curtain falls, the concert ends, the royal family exits the theater, the emperor climbs into his carriage, the horses are ready to go, and then bam,
Yeah.
a detonation.
A gunshot rings out right in front of the restaurant Maison Moderne at the Praça da Constituição.
Which today we know is Praça Tiradentes.
Right. So chaos, obviously. The police grab the shooter immediately. Now, if you're a bystander in 1889, you're feeling the political tension. You're probably thinking, this is it. The Republicans have made their move. This is a coup.
That would be the logical assumption, yes. But then you look at the shooter.
Okay, introduce us to our antagonist. Who is this man?
Meet Adriano Francisco Augusto de Valle. And he's not some hardened revolutionary. He's not a military strategist. He's 20 years old.
Johnny.
An unemployed clerk. And he was born in Coimbra, which makes him a Portuguese national.
So we've got an unemployed 20-year-old immigrant. That doesn't sound like a high-level political operative.
And he wasn't. The investigation showed he had absolutely no connections to the Republican movement. In fact, the details of his arrest are almost tragicomic.
Tragicomic feels like the right word. Where did the police find him? What was he doing?
He was in a bar, drinking heavily. And get this, after the shot, he was found in another bar, practically bragging. He was telling other customers that he'd just taken a shot at the emperor.
Wait, he was bragging about it?
Not just bragging. He said he would do it again because he was annoyed that he missed the first time.
Wow. That speaks to a certain level of, I don't know, delusion. It's not ideology, it's just ego.
Exactly. And when they interrogated him, the story got even stranger. He had checked into the Hotel Provenço earlier and asked a clerk there to hide his 2 revolvers. But it's his reasoning for the shooting that I find the most psychologically fascinating.
Okay, let's unpack this. What was his logic?
It was this twisted logic, a distorted sense of honor. Adriano told the police that if he had shot a normal person, he would have brought shame on his family. To kill a nobody is just a crime. But, he claimed, to shoot the emperor, that made him feel honored.
That is fascinating. So in his mind, the greatness of the target elevated the crime from a simple murder to, what, a historic act?
Precisely. He wanted to insert himself into the narrative of history. He was a nobody who wanted to be a somebody, and the fastest way to do that was to kill the most important person in the hemisphere.
Now, you said he had no ties to the Republicans, but didn't he shout something political?
He did. Witnesses claimed that while he was stumbling around drunk, he shouted, "Viva la República! Long live the Republic!"
Okay, so hold on. If a guy shoots at a monarch and yells, "Long live the Republic," usually we connect those dots. That sounds pretty political to me.
You would think so. And this is where the reaction of the media and the intellectual elite becomes the most fascinating part of this whole story. Because they refused to connect those dots.
They didn't want to admit it was political.
Not at all. It was a form of collective gaslighting. Look at the newspapers from the days that followed. The Gazzetta da Tarde, for example. They attributed the act to unconsciousness, madness, or drunkenness. They explicitly wrote, and I'm quoting here, "For the honor of the Republican Party, we do not believe such an act came from them."
Wow. So the press was protecting the reputation of the opposition party. That seems strange.
It wasn't about generosity. It was about fear. The Gazzetta de Noticia said it had no political significance. The Journal do Comercio called it an act of insanity. They were terrified of what a political assassination attempt would mean for the country.
It's like they were trying to put the genie back in the bottle. If they call him a madman, it's just an isolated incident. If they call him a political assassin, then the country is admitting it's on the brink of civil war.
Precisely. Although the Journal do Comercio did let a little bit of anxiety slip through. They wrote about a violent breath of revolt shaking the country from the family to the public square. They knew the tension was there, even if they didn't want to pin this specific shooting on it.
And we can't talk about the intellectual reaction without bringing in one of the biggest names of the era, Rui Barbosa.
The giant of Brazilian history. Diplomat, writer, jurist. And his take on this was just fascinatingly idealistic. He argued that it couldn't be a political crime because of the target.
Because the emperor was too loved.
Exactly. Barbosa argued that Dom Pedro II was so universally revered, so benevolent and so elderly that no political party would ever conceive of such cowardice. He believed the national sentiment simply wouldn't allow it. Therefore, the only explanation had to be a mental anomaly, something for science to study, not for the courts to judge.
That's such a romantic view. We love him too much for anyone to shoot him, so the shooter must be crazy. It shows how much respect Pedro II commanded, but also how much denial the elite were in.
And Pedro II himself contributed to this. He was a very astute man. He decided not to press charges.
He just let it go.
He wanted to bury the incident. He knew a big trial would only give the Republican movement oxygen. It might create a martyr out of Adriano, or it might just make the monarchy look weak. So, strategic silence.
But as we know, history has a wicked sense of irony. The emperor's attempt to hide the unrest completely failed. That violent breath of revolt was real.
And here's where the timeline gets really crazy. We're in July 1889. Fast forward just a few months to November.
November 15th, 1889, the Proclamation of the Republic, the empire falls, Dom Pedro II is deposed and sent into exile.
And the trial for Adriano, the guy who tried to shoot the emperor?
Don't tell me.
It hasn't happened yet.
Wait, so the government he attacked doesn't exist anymore?
It's exactly. The trial of Adriano Duvelle finally took place on November 23rd, 1889, 8 days after the Republic was proclaimed.
That is incredible. So he's being tried for shooting an emperor who is no longer emperor in a court that now serves the republic he was supposedly shouting for.
It's a legal and existential pretzel.
Yeah.
And the defense strategy was just brilliant in its absurdity.
Okay, lay it on me. How do you defend this guy?
2 prongs. First, factual denial. The defense argued, did he even shoot? They brought in coachmen and guards who said they heard nothing. They pointed out there were no bullet marks on the carriage.
But no harm, no foul defense.
But the second prong is my favorite, the substance abuse defense. The defense claimed that Adriano had been drinking absinthe.
Ah, the Green Fairy.
That's it. High alcohol, hallucinogenic absinthe. They argued it made him completely irrational. It wasn't malice, it wasn't treason, it was the liquor talking.
It wasn't me, Your Honor. It was the wormwood.
And did it work? It worked completely. Adriano Duvelle was acquitted. He was released immediately. As Professor Feingold notes in the source text, he was no longer Portuguese nor Republican. He was just a free man in a new country.
That is just wild. He tries to kill the head of state, fails, and walks free a few months later because the state changed management. It really underscores how political justice is often just politics.
Right. Once the emperor was gone, punishing Adriano served no purpose for the new republic. He was yesterday's news. He just faded into obscurity.
Did he live a long life?
No, not at all. He died young, at just 36 years old in 1903. He was living in Hiroshima in Rio de Janeiro state.
Cause of death.
Pulmonary tuberculosis. A common killer at the time. He was a widower by then. A quiet, sad end for a man who briefly held the attention of an entire nation.
It really is a tragedy all around. You know, when we look at these two events side by side, the Montiel attempt in 2022 and the Adriano attempt in 1889, what really stands out to you?
For me, it's the randomness of it all. The research highlights that while the political contexts are so different, the mechanism of the violence is weirdly similar. You have these isolated, often unstable individuals who project their own internal chaos onto the national stage.
The lone gunman syndrome.
Yes, and they aren't masterminds. Montiel's gun jammed, Adriano was drunk and maybe didn't even fire a real shot. They're clumsy. But the disruption they cause is massive. They force society to confront its own divisions.
It's like the violence forces a moment of clarity, or at least a moment where everyone has to hold their breath.
And it serves as this reminder that political figures, no matter how powerful an emperor or a vice president, are incredibly vulnerable to the whims of chance. A jammed gun, a bottle of absinthe, a missed shot. These small things can change history.
Absolutely. A sobering thought. If you want to dive even deeper into the sources we use today, Professor Feingold references some excellent materials that are definitely worth checking out.
Yes, for anyone interested in the visual history, Brasiliana Photográfica has great archives on the emperor and the violinist Giulietta de Onesi. It really helps you visualize the scene.
And for the legal nerds out there, there's the Tribunal de Relação de Ouro Preto historical note. Also, George Vidipo's work, Processo Criminal no Jornal do Século XIX, is fantastic for understanding how the paper spun the story.
And finally, the Miguelas Cuentas article on the pre-proclamation attempt is a great summary.
We will link all of those in the show notes. This has been quite a journey from Buenos Aires to Rio de Janeiro. A reminder that while the costumes change, the human drama of politics often stays the same.
And that sometimes the most significant historical events are the ones that almost happened, but didn't.
A huge thank you to historian Reuven Feingold for the incredible research that made this all possible, and thank you, the listener, for sticking with us.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having been with us. Don't forget to subscribe for free to the channel, and from now on, we invite you to follow the next episode.